Commander Alan Wright stared at the holographic display on the bridge of the Celestial Seeker. A small blue and green planet rotated slowly before his eyes. The ship's scanners had discovered this solar system just 3 days ago, and already, it was causing quite a stir among his crew. "Commander, you need to see these readings," Natalie Porter said, her voice tight with excitement. As the ship's lead science officer, Natalie rarely showed emotion, but today her eyes were wide as she handed him the data pad. Alan took the pad and scrolled through the information, his brow furrowed. "This can't be right. Run the scans again." "I've run them 5 times, sir. The results are consistent." Natalie pointed to a series of numbers on the screen. "The planet's atmosphere is a toxic blend of nitrogen and oxygen. The surface temperatures range from freezing to scorching. There are massive bodies of dihydrogen monoxide covering 70% of the surface." "And yet there's life?" Alan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just life, sir. Intelligent life. Advanced civilization. They've developed nuclear technology, primitive space travel, and global communication networks, all while living on what should be a death trap by Council standards. The Galactic Council had classified planets for millennia. Most inhabited worlds fell into the paradise category. Stable climate, minimal natural disasters, predictable seasons. The Council races had evolved in gentle cradles. This planet was different. This was what xenobiologists called a death world. Alan zoomed in on a continent. How did they survive long enough to build cities? The geological data shows regular tectonic activity, cyclonic storms, and extreme seasonal variations. Lieutenant Greg Barnes, the ship's communications specialist, joined them at the display. "Sir, we've intercepted their broadcast signals. They call their planet Earth, and they call themselves humans." "Humans," Alan repeated, testing the strange word. "And they've never attempted to leave this death trap?" "Oh, they have," Natalie said, bringing up new data. "But their technology is primitive. They've only reached their own satellite and made brief visits to the 4th planet in their system." Alan made his decision. "Prepare a first contact team, standard protocols." "Sir," Greg said hesitantly, "there's something else you should know. The ship's AI just decoded some of the warning markers at the edge of this system. Old markers, sir, not Council design." Alan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do they say?" "They're incomplete, but they seem to be warning ships away from this system, specifically, away from Earth." Alan looked back at the beautiful blue planet. Warning beacons weren't placed without reason, but the Council had standing orders to investigate all intelligent life. His duty was clear. "Maintain orbit. I want a full analysis of their languages before we attempt communication." Later that night, alone in his quarters, Alan reviewed the findings that continued to pour in. The humans had survived things that would have wiped out most Council species: global wars, devastating plagues, climate shifts, asteroid impacts. Instead of dying out, they had adapted and grown stronger. Most disturbing were their entertainment broadcasts. Humans didn't just survive horror, they invented it for fun. They created stories about monsters, disasters, and apocalyptic scenarios. They deliberately frightened themselves. The ship's doctor, Karen Wells, had submitted her preliminary report on human biology. "Their cells contain DNA from thousands of viruses," she wrote. "They are walking biological archives of every pathogen they've encountered. And they host billions of microorganisms in their bodies deliberately." As Alan prepared for sleep, his personal terminal chimed with a priority message. It was from the ship's security chief. "Commander, we've analyzed their weapons capabilities. Request immediate meeting. These humans have spent more of their history at war than at peace. They've developed weapons specifically designed to kill their own kind in the most efficient ways possible. If they ever leave their planet with these mindsets intact..." Alan shut off the terminal. Tomorrow would be soon enough to worry about that. But as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't help but wonder, what kind of species could evolve on a world that seemed designed to kill them? And what would such a species do when they learned they weren't alone in the universe? The warning beacons suddenly made much more sense. Image description for Leonardo AI. A futuristic spaceship command bridge with a worried commander looking at a holographic display of Earth. Blue and green planet projection hovers in center of high-tech control room. Crew members in uniform look concerned while examining datapads. Stars visible through large viewport windows. Soft blue lighting throughout the advanced alien vessel. Dr. Olivia Hayes hadn't planned on making history today. She had simply been monitoring deep space radio signals, a routine task she had performed hundreds of times before at NASA's listening station in New Mexico. But the pattern that appeared on her screen at 2:17 a.m. was anything but routine. "That's not natural," she whispered to herself, watching as the signal repeated in perfect intervals. No pulsar or quasar created patterns like this. This was a message. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers and called her supervisor. By noon, the modest facility had been transformed. Military vehicles lined the perimeter. Inside, a hastily assembled team of experts huddled around Olivia's workstation. Captain Eric Peterson paced behind them, his uniform crisp despite the early morning call. "And you're certain this is coming from within our solar system?" he asked. "For the third time." "Just beyond Mars's orbit," Olivia confirmed. "It's approaching Earth at a steady rate. Too steady for a natural object." Dr. Sam Collins, a linguistics expert flown in from Harvard, hadn't looked up from his tablet in hours. "The pattern repeats, but with subtle variations. It's not random, it's structured like language. Can you decode it?" Eric asked. Sam shook his head. "Not without more data, but I think they're trying different approaches, like they're cycling through languages hoping we'll recognize one." "They?" Eric's voice was tense. "Whoever sent the signal," Sam replied simply. Olivia pointed to her screen. "The object is slowing down, taking up position in high Earth orbit." The room fell silent. Decades of science fiction movies had prepared humanity for this moment, or so they thought. But the reality of actual alien contact felt different, heavier, more real than any film could capture. "We need to respond," Olivia said firmly. "If they wanted to harm us, they could have done it already. That ship is clearly more advanced than anything we have." Eric frowned. "We don't know their intentions." "But we know ours," Olivia countered. "We've been sending signals into space for decades, hoping someone would hear us. And now someone has. We can't just hide." After much debate, the president authorized a response. A simple mathematical sequence, universal in its logic, followed by basic information about Earth's atmosphere and human biology. If the visitors needed to breathe, they should know what awaited them. What no one on Earth could have guessed was the alarm this simple message caused aboard the Celestial Seeker. "They just sent us their atmospheric composition," Natalie Porter said, her face pale as she showed Commander Wright the decoded message. "They're not just surviving in that toxic soup, they're inviting us to come down into it." Alan Wright studied the data. Oxygen levels that high would be corrosive to most council species, and the temperature range they consider comfortable would cause tissue damage for 90% of known sentient species, added Karen Wells, reviewing the biological data. "These humans must have incredible cellular repair mechanisms, Greg." Barnes looked up from his station. "Sir, they're broadcasting on all frequencies now. Audio and visual signals, they're welcoming us." The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as images of smiling humans appeared on their screens. The aliens were extending their hands, showing peaceful gestures, offering friendship. "They're not afraid," Alan said wonderingly. Any rational species seeing an advanced ship appear in their sky would be terrified. But they're excited. "It's a trick," suggested Security Chief Pete Howard. "No species could evolve to be so fearless." But Alan was beginning to understand. Unless they evolved on a world where fear either paralyzed you or pushed you to overcome it. A world where curiosity had to outweigh caution for survival. He made his decision. Prepare a landing party, full biohazard protocols. As the chosen team prepared to descend to Earth, Karen Wells administered final immune boosters. Remember, their bodies are filled with microorganisms. What's normal for them could be deadly for us. On Earth, Olivia Hayes watched the small shuttle detach from the larger ship and begin its descent. Beside her, Sam Collins whispered, "Do you think they're as nervous as we are?" Olivia smiled. "More, probably. We're just meeting visitors. They're landing on a completely alien world." Neither human realized just how right Olivia was, or that to the rest of the galaxy, Earth was considered the most terrifying planet ever to produce sentient life. Image description for Leonardo AI. NASA control room with scientists and military. Personnel gathered around computer screens showing alien signal patterns. A female scientist points at main display showing spacecraft in Earth orbit. Tension and excitement visible on diverse faces illuminated by screen glow. Military captain stands watching with arms crossed. Nighttime setting with multiple monitors. Satellite imagery. Council medical officer Susan Carter had never seen anything like the human body. Through the thick glass of the quarantine lab aboard the shuttle, she watched the microscopic dance of cells taken from a willing human donor. Dr. Olivia Hayes had volunteered a blood sample as a gesture of goodwill. What that sample revealed was anything but goodwill to Susan's trained eyes. "This is impossible," she muttered, adjusting the scanner. No sentient species could have this many foreign organisms inside them and survive. The human blood cells moved through the viewing field, surrounded by what Susan could only describe as an ecosystem. Bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms lived in apparent harmony with the human cells. According to all council medical knowledge, this should have resulted in massive infection and death. Instead, the human body had incorporated these invaders, even used them. Susan's assistant, Ryan Baker, looked equally disturbed. "I've completed the genetic analysis," he said, handing her a data pad. "Their DNA contains sequences from thousands of viruses that infected their ancestors. Instead of dying, they absorbed the viral genetic material." "They're genetic scavengers," Susan whispered. "Worse," Ryan said. "They're symbiotic with microorganisms. Their digestive systems contain trillions of bacteria that help them process food. They have mites living in their eyelashes, fungi on their skin. They're not individuals, they're walking colonies." The implications were staggering. In the sterile environments of council worlds where most diseases had been eliminated centuries ago, a human visitor would be a biological catastrophe. A single handshake could transfer millions of microorganisms to a population with no defense against them. As if to prove the point, a warning light began flashing on Susan's console. The ship's air quality sensors had detected an anomaly. "What now?" she groaned, bringing up the alert. The answer made her blood run cold. Respiratory particles from the human delegation had entered the ship's air filtration system despite all precautions. 3 crew members were already showing symptoms of what humans casually called the common cold. Down on Earth, Commander Alan Wright sat across from Captain Eric Peterson in a hastily arranged meeting room at NASA. Both men were trying to ignore the teams of scientists on both sides who were studying each other with barely concealed fascination. "Your medical officer seems concerned," Eric observed, watching Susan Carter rush back to the shuttle through the window. Alan chose his words carefully. "We come from different environments. Your biology is unlike anything we've encountered." Eric laughed. "I hope that's a compliment." It wasn't, but Alan forced a smile. How could he explain that humans were considered walking biohazards? That the council would likely quarantine the entire solar system once his report reached them. Back on the shuttle, Susan was treating the affected crew members. Their symptoms were mild, sneezing, slight congestion, but the speed of transmission was alarming. "It's just a cold virus," she explained to the worried crew. "Humans get them regularly and recover without treatment." "Humans live with this?" asked one crew member incredulously, blowing his nose for what was clearly the first time in his life. Susan nodded grimly. "They experience dozens of minor infections throughout their lives. Their immune systems are constantly at war, and somehow, they just accept it as normal." On the third day of contact, a human child wandered too close to the alien shuttle. Before guards could intervene, the boy sneezed directly onto the landing gear. By nightfall, every member of the alien delegation was showing symptoms. When Alan confronted Olivia about the incident, she was genuinely confused by his anger. "It's just a cold," she said. "You'll feel better in a week." "A week?" Alan was aghast. "Your species routinely endures viral infections that last for days?" Olivia shrugged. "Sometimes longer during flu season." Alan sent his report that night. Earth was officially classified as a biological hazard zone. The report contained one firm recommendation: quarantine. Not just of Earth, but of any human who left the planet. What Alan couldn't know was that the Council would read his report with growing horror, not just at human biology, but at what it implied. Any species that evolved in such a biological battleground would have to be incredibly resilient. And resilient species were unpredictable, dangerous. The humans had survived in a world that should have killed them countless times over. What else? Had they survived? And what had that survival cost them? Image description for Leonardo AI. Alien medical lab with transparent containment units. Female medical officer in protective suit examines holographic displays showing human blood cells, surrounded by microorganisms. Magnified view of blood sample floating in 3D projection shows red blood cells interacting with bacteria and viruses. Background shows concerned alien scientists monitoring warning lights flashing on control panels. Sterile white and blue laboratory, with advanced medical technology contrasts with the chaotic biological activity in the sample being studied. Jack Miller had studied the psychology of 17 different sentient species during his career as a council psychologist. None had prepared him for humans. "You do this for fun?" he asked, watching a group of humans jump from a perfectly functional aircraft with only thin fabric parachutes to slow their fall. Sam Collins, who had been assigned as Jack's guide, nodded enthusiastically. "Skydiving. I've done it 6 times myself, nothing quite like the rush of free fall." Jack made careful notes on his datapad. The word rush appeared repeatedly in human descriptions of activities that should, by all rational standards, trigger pure terror. They sought out this rush through countless dangerous activities: climbing tall mountains without oxygen, diving deep underwater, racing vehicles at deadly speeds, and even fighting each other in controlled combat they called sports. "And this helps you relax?" Jack asked, struggling to understand. Sam laughed. "Not exactly relax, it's more about feeling alive." The concept was entirely foreign to Jack. On council worlds, citizens lived carefully structured lives designed to minimize risk and maximize comfort. The goal was to avoid feeling death's presence, not to flirt with it for entertainment. Even more disturbing was what humans did with their entertainment media. Jack had spent the previous evening watching what humans called horror movies with a group of NASA employees who had invited him for what they called a movie night. The humans had eaten snacks and laughed while watching scenes of fictional monsters hunting and killing people. But why? Jack had asked repeatedly. Why create scenarios of your own destruction for entertainment? None of the answers satisfied him. Some claimed it was cathartic, others said it was just pretend. But Jack saw something deeper. Humans had evolved in a world where danger was constant. Instead of developing psychological avoidance of danger, they had developed psychological tools to face it, even embrace it. Now, as he completed his report for Commander Wright, Jack included a new term he had coined: thrill-seeking paradox. While most species evolved to avoid danger, humans had evolved to overcome their fear of it. In a world filled with predators, diseases, and natural disasters, those who could function despite fear, or even use fear as motivation, had survived. Their entertainment reflects this paradox, Jack wrote in his report. They create simulations of danger through games, media, and extreme sports. They deliberately trigger fear responses in controlled environments, building psychological resilience to real dangers. Most disturbingly, they find humor in situations that would traumatize most sentient beings. Jack's assistant, Andy Kim, had spent the day analyzing human literature. His findings only reinforced Jack's concerns. They have entire genres devoted to imaginary threats, Andy reported. Stories about worlds ending, civilizations collapsing, monsters hunting them. And they've been creating these stories since before they had written language. Why? Jack asked, the same question he kept returning to. Practice, Andy suggested. Psychological practice for worst-case scenarios. That night, Jack witnessed something that confirmed his theory. A small earthquake shook the region, a 4.2 on the human scale, barely noticeable to the humans but terrifying to the alien delegation. While the council visitors panicked, the humans reacted with what Jack could only describe as bored routine. They checked for damage, made sure everyone was safe, then went back to their activities. When Jack expressed his amazement at their calm, Dr. Olivia Hayes simply shrugged. This wasn't even a real quake, just a little tremor. You live on ground that regularly shakes and you call it little? Jack asked. Olivia smiled. You get used to it. Those 4 words haunted Jack's final report. Humans don't just survive in adversity, he wrote. They adapt to it so completely that danger becomes normal. What would traumatize other species becomes, in their words, something you get used to. The council's response was swift. Humans were classified as a psychological anomaly, a species that should have developed crippling anxiety disorders from their environment, but instead developed unique mental frameworks that turned fear into a tool rather than a limitation. The question that troubled the council most was simple. What would beings who had mastered fear do when they entered the wider galaxy? And what new horrors might they bring with them, having evolved on a world that should have broken their minds long ago? Image description for Leonardo AI. Alien Sci-Fi. Council Security Chief Frank Baxter had seen weapons before. In his 50 years of service, he had cataloged arms from dozens of worlds. But nothing had prepared him for the human approach to warfare. This is just part of their military museum, Captain Eric Peterson explained as he led Frank through the display of weapons spanning human history. Represents about 5,000 years of military technology. Frank stopped in front of a glass case containing a simple curved blade. What is this? Kopesh, Egyptian weapon from around 3,000 years ago, Eric said. Bronze Age technology. Frank moved slowly through the museum, noting how each weapon improved on the last. Spears became longer, bows became more powerful, swords became sharper. The evolution wasn't random. It was deliberate, methodical. Humans hadn't just discovered ways to kill. They had studied it, refined it, perfected it. And this? Frank asked, pointing to a small metal object. Colt revolver. First popular repeating. Firearm. Changed warfare forever. The words changed warfare forever appeared in Frank's notes repeatedly as the tour continued. Humans didn't just fight. They constantly revolutionized how they fought. Back on the Celestial Seeker, Frank delivered his preliminary report to Commander Wright and the council representatives who had arrived after the initial contact. Humans have spent more of their recorded history at war than at peace, Frank began, displaying images on the main screen. While most species developed weapons as tools for hunting that were later adapted for conflict, humans designed weapons specifically to kill other humans. The council members shifted uncomfortably as Frank continued. Their military doctrine is unlike anything in council records. They have concepts like psychological warfare, using fear as a weapon. Guerrilla tactics, using their knowledge of terrain to defeat technologically superior forces. Mutually assured destruction, keeping peace by ensuring any conflict would destroy everyone involved. Barbaric, muttered one council member. No, Frank corrected. Effective. Humans survived on a world with limited resources by ensuring that warfare had rules, costs, and consequences that everyone understood. Frank brought up a new set of images. Most concerning is how their military technology drives their civilian advances. They developed computers to break enemy codes. They created the internet for military communication. They explored space initially for military advantage. Are they a threat? Commander Wright asked directly. Frank chose his words carefully. Not intentionally, but their approach to conflict resolution includes concepts foreign to Council species. They see showing strength as a path to peace. They train for war to avoid it. "What do you recommend?" asked a Council member. "Restricted access to advanced propulsion technology," Frank said without hesitation. "Humans shouldn't be allowed to expand rapidly until we better understand their approach to conflict. And limited sharing of our weapons technology, not because they would use it against us, but because they would improve it in ways we cannot predict." Later that day, Frank met with human military leaders at their request. They wanted to understand the Council's defense capabilities against common space threats. "Do you have weapons against asteroid impacts?" General Lisa Morgan asked. "We can alter their trajectories," Frank explained. "And against solar flares, gamma-ray bursts, rogue black holes?" Each question came rapidly, focused on threats Frank's people rarely considered. "These events are statistically unlikely," Frank said. General Morgan leaned forward. "But they happen, and when they do, you need to be ready. Hoping for the best isn't a defense strategy." Frank realized with growing unease that humans applied their military thinking to everything, even natural disasters. They didn't just prepare for enemies. They treated the universe itself as a potential threat requiring countermeasures. When the human delegation presented their proposed terms for joining the galactic community, their requests were telling. They wanted defensive technology, early warning systems, and mutual defense agreements. They viewed membership not as a cultural exchange, but as a strategic alliance against cosmic threats. "They see everything through the lens of survival," Frank told Commander Wright afterward. "Not just survival of their nation or planet, but survival of their species. They plan for disaster scenarios thousands of years in the future." The Council debated for 3 days before reaching their decision. Humans would be allowed limited contact with the galactic community, but restricted from mass colonization efforts. Their military doctrines were too unpredictable, their survival instincts too deeply ingrained. What the Council couldn't fully appreciate was that these same qualities had saved humanity countless times on their deadly homeworld. The very traits that made them dangerous, their preparedness for disaster, their ability to find opportunity in crisis, their refusal to surrender to overwhelming odds, were the reasons they had survived long enough to reach the stars at all. Image. Description for Leonardo AI. Military Museum with Council Security Chief in formal uniform, examining ancient and modern human weapons. Display cases show evolution of warfare from bronze swords to modern firearms. Tall alien diplomat with stern expression takes notes on digital pad, while human military captain in dress uniform explains exhibits with pride. Museum lighting creates dramatic shadows across technological progression of weapons. Holographic information displays float beside key artifacts. Background shows other visitors viewing military technology timeline that ends with space defense systems, highlighting humanity's constant innovation in warfare. Despite the Council's attempts to limit human contact with the wider galaxy, Earth, culture spread like wildfire. Council Cultural Officer Diane Lewis watched with growing alarm as the contamination progressed faster than anyone had predicted. 6 months after first contact, she submitted her third urgent report. "Human music has been found on 17 Council worlds," she wrote. "Their visual art is being displayed in major galleries on 5 planets. Their cuisine, despite being based on plants and animals that evolved in Earth's toxic environment, has become fashionable in high society circles." The Council called an emergency session. Diane presented her findings to the assembled representatives, her voice tight with concern. "We expected some cultural exchange, but nothing like this. The humans call it going viral, an apt metaphor given their biology. Their ideas spread like their diseases, rapidly, unpredictably, and with mutation." A Council member raised a hand. "What harm can come from music or art?" Diane brought up a new slide. "The issue isn't the art itself. It's the concepts embedded within it. Human fiction, for example, contains ideas that are destabilizing to Council society." She displayed quotes from human books, stories about rebels overthrowing governments, individuals challenging authority, people choosing their own paths rather than following predetermined roles. Most Council species evolved in stable environments, where cooperation and conformity ensured survival, Diane explained. Humans evolved in chaos, where adaptability and individual initiative often meant the difference between life and death. Their stories reflect this. They glorify the individual who breaks rules, who thinks differently. The representatives murmured uneasily as Diane continued. Their philosophy is even more troubling. Listen to this concept they call existentialism. Humans believe the universe has no inherent meaning, so they must create their own meaning. The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. The idea was alien to most council species, who had evolved with clear purposes and roles within their societies. How do they function with such beliefs? Asked one representative. That's what makes them dangerous, Diane said. They don't just survive with these ideas, they thrive on them. They find purpose in a purposeless universe, meaning in meaninglessness. And now they're sharing these concepts with our worlds. Reports were already coming in of council citizens questioning their assigned roles, seeking to choose their own paths. Young people were particularly susceptible, captivated by human notions of freedom and self-determination. Their most viral export isn't their music or their food, Diane concluded. It's the idea that you can choose who you want to be instead of accepting who you are. After the session, Commander Alan Wright found Diane in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at Earth. The council voted to restrict cultural exchange, he said. Too late, in my opinion. Diane nodded. Much too late. You can quarantine a disease, but how do you quarantine an idea, especially when people want to be infected? Alan sat beside her. You know what fascinates me most about humans? Their fiction. They create countless imaginary worlds. Some better than their own, some worse. They rehearse possible futures through stories. It's their adaptability again, Diane said. They evolved to imagine different scenarios, to mentally prepare for change. Council species evolve for stability, for known conditions. Which approach is better? Alan asked. Diane had no answer. In stable environments, council methods were superior, but the universe wasn't always stable. Planets died, stars exploded, climate changed. In those moments, the human approach, their comfort with chaos, their ability to reimagine themselves, might prove more valuable. That night, Diane found herself reading human poetry instead of working on her report. One line stood out. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light, the con. Deep space archaeologist Paul Garcia floated in zero gravity inside the ancient alien beacon. His breathing echoed inside his helmet as he carefully examined symbols that no one had seen for millions of years. Any progress? Commander Wright's voice crackled through the comm system. I think so, Paul replied, his light illuminating more of the strange writing. These aren't council symbols. They're much older. When the first warning beacons had been discovered around Earth's solar system, everyone assumed they were placed by the Galactic Council. But Paul had recognized subtle differences in the design. These beacons predated the Council by eons. I need more time with the translation matrix, Paul said, capturing images of every surface. But I'm certain these were left by the predecessors. The predecessors, a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago, leaving only fragments of their technology scattered across the galaxy. Most council species treated them as little more than legend. Back aboard the research vessel, Paul fed the images into the ship's computer. For 3 days he barely slept as the translation program worked through millions of possible interpretations. On the 4th day, the computer chimed. Paul stared at the screen, reading the translated warning with growing disbelief. Commander, he called over the ship's comm, you need to see this now. Alan Wright arrived minutes later, followed by senior researchers from both the Council and Earth. They gathered around Paul's workstation in silence. The beacons weren't placed by the Council, Paul explained. They were left by the predecessors over 5 million years ago. And they weren't meant to warn others away from humans. They were warnings about Earth itself. He displayed the translated text on the main screen. Beware the Earthborn. They are the children of extinction, shaped by catastrophe, survivors of their own mistakes. What does not kill them makes them stronger. and much has tried to kill them. What does it mean? Asked Olivia Hayes, representing the Earth delegation. Paul took a deep breath. I believe the predecessors visited Earth during its early development. They witnessed something that terrified them. He brought up Earth's geological timeline. Your planet has experienced at least 5 mass extinction events. Most worlds with complex life experience may be 1 or 2 before evolutionary processes stabilize. Earth just kept having them. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Each time, Paul continued, life on Earth didn't just recover, it came back more resilient, more adaptable. The predecessors saw this cycle and recognized something unprecedented. And humans? Alan Wright asked. You evolved in the most recent recovery period, Paul explained. But unlike most species, who evolve in stable conditions after extinction, humans evolved while Earth was still experiencing frequent disasters, ice ages, volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts. You're the product of an evolutionary pressure cooker. Paul pulled up more translated text. The predecessors called Earth the Crucible, a planet that destroys and remakes its life repeatedly. They believed such a world would eventually produce beings of incredible resilience. They feared us, Olivia realized. With good reason, Paul said quietly. Further excavation of predecessor ruins revealed something unexpected. They didn't just leave warnings about Earth. They actively tried to sterilize it several times. Gasps echoed through the room. My team found evidence of engineered asteroids diverted toward Earth, artificial climate change attempts, even tailored pathogens. The predecessors tried to kill Earth's biosphere before it could produce a sentient species. But why? Alan demanded. Because Earth doesn't just evolve life, Paul said grimly. It evolves survivors. The predecessors realized that any sentient species from Earth would have extinction-level events coded into their DNA, their psychology, their societies. You wouldn't just survive in the galaxy, you would transform it, just as catastrophes transformed you. Paul looked directly at Olivia. Humans didn't just evolve on a death world, you helped make it that way. Your ancestors survived multiple self-inflicted near-extinction events, nuclear brinkmanship, climate disasters, engineered pandemics, events that would have wiped out any other species. That's why the Council finds us so disturbing, Olivia whispered. We're not just survivors of a harsh world, we're survivors of ourselves. As the meeting dispersed, Paul reviewed the final sections of the predecessor warning. He decided not to share one last line that the translation matrix had decoded. If the Earthborn ever reach the stars, the galaxy will never be the same. They will either be its salvation or its end, for they alone understand that creation and destruction are 2 faces of the same force. Image description for Leonardo AI, space archaeologist in sleek spacesuit, floating inside ancient alien structure with holographic translation tools. Archaeologist examines mysterious glowing symbols etched into curved metallic walls. Helmet lights illuminate ancient warning beacon with circular patterns of alien text. Zero-gravity environment with floating debris and dust particles catching. Light beams. Background shows stars through structural opening. Wrist-mounted device projects translation attempts in multiple languages while scanning the ancient text. The scene has eerie blue and amber lighting that casts long shadows across the weathered alien architecture, creating atmosphere of discovery and foreboding. The alert came without warning. Commander Alan Wright was awakened by the ship's AI at 0300 hours. Priority message from Galactic Council headquarters, the AI announced. Code red. Alan rushed to the bridge, still pulling on his uniform. The main screen showed Council Supreme Director Kelly Zhao, her face grim. Commander Wright, we need humanity's help, she said without preamble. We are facing an extinction-level threat. Within an hour, Alan had assembled a joint Human Council emergency team. The briefing was short and terrifying. A dormant mechanical race known as the Harvesters had awakened at the edge of Council space. 3 outer colonies had already gone silent. The Harvesters weren't invaders in the traditional sense. They were more like a force of nature, consuming all organic materials and intelligent systems to replicate themselves. Our conventional defenses have failed, Kelly explained. The Harvesters, Adapt to energy weapons after minimal exposure. Biological weapons are useless against mechanical entities. What about negotiation? Asked Olivia Hayes. They don't communicate, Kelly replied. They simply consume. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Council, with all its advanced technology and thousands of years of peaceful expansion, had no experience with an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or deterred. I need to consult with Earth, Olivia said finally. 24 hours later, a human coalition had formed. Military strategists, engineers, biologists, and historians gathered in a hastily assembled war room. The approach they developed shocked the Council representatives. Linda Martinez, Earth's newly appointed defense coordinator, presented their plan. The harvesters adapt quickly to any single approach, she explained. So we won't use just one. We'll use dozens, simultaneously and continuously changing. That's chaos, objected a Council military advisor. Exactly, Linda said with a tight smile. Chaos is Earth's specialty. The plan was unprecedented in Council history. Instead of a unified, coordinated defense, humans proposed multiple independent strike teams using constantly varying tactics. No central command that could be predicted or destroyed. No single strategy that could be adapted. 2. Guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale, Alan whispered to Kelly. Exactly what Frank Baxter warned about in his military assessment. Can it work? Kelly asked. Alan watched as the humans rapidly organized themselves, forming teams around specific approaches. It's what they evolved to do, find creative solutions under impossible pressure. If anyone can do this, they can. The Council had no choice but to agree. Within days, human ships were deployed alongside Council vessels. The first encounters confirmed their worst fears. Conventional Council tactics failed completely against the harvesters. But the human approaches yielded surprising results. One team used rapidly modulating frequencies to confuse harvester navigation. Another deployed engineered viruses that targeted the interface between mechanical and organic components. A third team discovered that harvester communication could be disrupted by mimicking deep space background radiation, something humans had studied extensively due to their early primitive space exploration efforts. No single approach worked for long before the harvesters adapted. But together, the constant changes kept the mechanical race off balance. In the pivotal battle at Proxima Colony, human commander Ben Foster did something no Council strategist would have considered. He sacrificed his own ship to save the colony. The Council was horrified by the loss of life, but the humans simply called it necessary. We understand extinction, Linda explained to the shocked Council. We've faced it repeatedly on Earth. We know that survival sometimes requires sacrifice. 6 months into the conflict, the tide began to turn. The harvesters' advance slowed, then stopped. Human ingenuity had found the patterns in their adaptation, the limits of their learning capability. As the immediate crisis passed, the Council convened to reassess humanity's place in galactic society. The debate was intense. They saved us, argued Kelly. Their chaotic tactics, their comfort with sacrifice, their ability to function in crisis, these are TR